Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaRevelis and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link down in the description to the page, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. My name is Joshua Revelis. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down with fellow enthusiasts to talk about what's going on in the technology, business, and gaming world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Revelis. You guys already know who I am. Let's get down to business already, shall we? So, in recent news, it looks like Apple finally updated the iPad mini and the iPad Air. I personally was not expecting this because I honestly was probably one of the few, or I'd say the group of individuals that believe that they were just going to cut off the Air and the mini line because realistically they haven't updated them in such a long time. Like, let's be real. The last iPad mini, the Mini 4, came out in 2015. And then we look at the iPad Air 2, that one came out the year before in 2014. So clearly we're talking about a 4 to 5 year span that they haven't upgraded them. But every other iPad has been upgraded ever since, and obviously the Pros and everything. So why should we care about the Mini 5 and the Air 3? So I think really what we need to realize is Apple's mindset behind them when they initially introduced them. So if we look back, we can see that in history, clearly because it's history, because it happened before, that the original Mini came out on November 2nd of 2012. So obviously, in retrospect, that's about to be 7 years when we hit November in this year. And the original iPad Air came out the year after and a day before on the same month. So it came out November 1st of 2013. These iPads were intended to be the budget line. They were intended to be the affordable option that if anybody wanted to get an iPad, they could. And I do agree with the mindset behind it, especially because the iPad minis at the time were pretty small. Like, they were probably the average size smartphone screen that we have nowadays. The only difference is obviously it's a tablet. So obviously it's going to have more battery life and et cetera, et cetera. And obviously the iPad Air was considered a miniature version of the base iPad. Fast forward a little bit later, as we get different iterations of the iPad mini and the Air, even though the Air had less, because the Air only got up to, well, now 3, but it only had up to 2, and the mini was up to 4 at this point. Because the iPad Air 2, the last iPad Air that came out before this one was in 2014. So obviously 2 iterations back to back, meh, you know what I mean? It's like, They didn't really touch it after that. And obviously the mini had different iterations. It's up to 5 now. So the previous 4 came out consecutively. And it's interesting because Apple always viewed them as the budget line. They never viewed them as anything else, except obviously, you know, some people were able to make do with what they had with those iPads and make them do professional work. Obviously, I'm referring to Henny, the business experience, with starting his music career on an iPad. Well, he didn't start his career on the iPad. Obviously, he was like every other producer. He had his own studio and everything, but he realized that having more of a minimalist mindset when it comes to making audio was a better choice because it made it easier for the ideas to come to his head. So that's why he sold his entire studio, shut it down, and then basically switched to working on an iPad Air. And it's interesting because that's kind of why they made the Pro line. If you think the Pro was supposed to be for professional use, not the Air or even the Mini. Realistically, I don't see why you would use the Mini in a professional setting because it's tiny, but the Air made sense. And now that we have that out of the way, we really should talk about the spec bumps, because this is where it gets interesting and why I believe Apple changed their mind on it and not treating it like a budget line, especially because both of them specifically, will now have the A12 chip. And anybody that has a new iPhone, either the XR, the X Max, or the XS, That's the chip inside of those phones. That's interesting. Obviously, yes, it's not going to have the A12X Bionic, which is the one in the Pros, which are basically CPU level power or PC level power in theory, which it actually does outdo the MacBooks, which is funny. But you get the point. The fact that they gave it that chip is interesting. Obviously, yes, it doesn't have the RAM like the Pros, but still, like, that's a lot of power that they gave those iPads. Obviously, yes, their battery, we're going to have to see how the battery life handles it, but that's very impressive that they decided to add the A12 chip. And not only that, they also buffed up the sizes. So now the Mini 3 is now 7.9 inches, and it actually fits in your hand fairly easily based on what we're seeing. Because when Tim Cook posted on Twitter, like actually announcing them, that he showed him writing on it, which we're going to get to that, it fit in his hand perfectly fine. And it's interesting that, you know, it's able to fit that well. And then the iPad Air 3 is now a 10.5 inch, so the same size as the late 2017 iPad Pro. And before you guys start asking, if you have a Pro, yes, all the accessories that you have for the 10.5 inch will work for the Air 3. It will, because it's basically the exact same form factor and everything. And they also added another thing, which is interesting, that now they support the first generation Apple Pencil. That's huge, specifically for the Mini, but we'll get to that. But the fact that they both now have Apple Pencil support, obviously it's the first one, not the second, because they still have USB. Well, they don't have USB Type-C. They have the Lightning port. We wanted them to have USB Type-C, but, you know, we can't really push it that much. But, like I was saying, we really have to ask ourselves, why, though? Why would they give the quote-unquote budget lines basically one of the most powerful, I'd say, cores you can really put in a smartphone? And I think the reality of the question is that I think Apple's realizing that they can do more for less. I think they're starting to figure out that, yes, even though I'll be honest with you, I do believe Apple does charge a little bit too much for their products, but I do believe that their service and everything has gotten better, and their hardware is clearly most of the time ahead of the competition by a lot. And it's interesting because why did they need it? Why did they need to update the Mini and the Air? Like, they had already recently just lowered the price of the iPad 2018 version to $279. So that was already an affordable iPad for everybody. That's $280. But obviously, yes, it has an old CPU and everything, and it's just not as good. It's obviously worse than the late 2017 Pro. But now that the Mini and the Air have a new CPU, which is far ahead of the 2017 iPad Pro, what does this mean? So, I'm going to present at least 3 scenarios on that I believe this is very effective. The first one is talking about the Mini's effect on med school students, because to my knowledge, talking to some people that I know that actually work in the medical field, iPads are becoming more and more popular. And based on some research I've conducted, I'm even seeing that even in medical school, obviously, yes, students like to have little notepads with them to take notes while observing what's going on from a professional doctor. And it's interesting because now that the Mini supports the Apple Pencil, it can be a viable option for med students. It's a viable note-taking option because now it fits in the hand. So now it's basically a notepad is what it is. And it's interesting because you're like, that's actually a point. And then I would even argue, like, if you're even a student, the iPad Air and the Mini are a great deal for you guys, especially given their price point. Like, the 64 gigabyte iPad Mini 5, I'm just going to call it the Mini 5, starts at $399, while the Air 3 starts at $499. So obviously, these are very affordable options to a degree. Like, for tablets, yes, I do agree that Apple overall makes the best tablets, and I believe that, yeah, they can charge a little bit more than the competition because you're paying for an actual superior product. Now, obviously, yes, they had to cut some corners. Obviously, yes, they're using the more older design that we're all familiar with, along with Touch ID and not Face ID, because I feel like they had to do that if they wanted to keep the prices low, but they didn't cheap out on the specs. And then Battery size, we don't know if they increased, but I'm assuming they did since they made them bigger. And what else are we talking about? I think another thing would probably be to bring up is, since we referred to Henny, I think it's important to talk about people that are considering that they want to be audio and sound engineers. Now that the tools are becoming cheaper, it makes more sense, and realistically, it presents more opportunities for people to jump in. Like, people like me, I'm actually working on this for a paper in my engineering ethics class, that I'm presenting the argument that realistically, the iPad Pro is a very, very big driving force into moving how people can become audio engineers and who has access to become one specifically. And I will make the argument that it overall lowers the education needed, because if we're being real here, yes, there's nothing wrong with going to school to learn your trade or anything. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But the fact is if it's a trade that can be learned on your own and you can do it professionally well on your own, I realistically don't see the point of going to school for it. Because if you look at audio and sound engineering to work in actual like studios and everything, you don't need a college diploma. Like, realistically, the only benefit you get from the college diploma is the professional experience, which getting to work with other professionals earlier. But obviously, if you're learning how to master your craft before that, I really think you'll be fine, because when you start presenting yourself in the professional field, then you'll get experience. Because honestly, I do believe that you're never going to learn unless you're willing to put your hands on something. And I believe that truly applies to engineers. That if you're not willing to be involved in something or to get involved with what you're doing, then you're never really going to learn how it works. And I think overall for engineering, that's very important. And the fact that the iPad mini and the Air 3 are now giving those tools to people at a much younger age, I do believe we're going to see an increase in how many people are going to be involved in audio and sound engineering now. And to me, this is very huge, because obviously, for people that like listening to music and your favorite artists and things like that, more people could end up creating music for them. Like Henny, obviously, his entire sheet talks about everything and everyone he's worked with. And it's very impressive. It's very legit resume. He's worked for the likes of Drake, 50 Cent. I could keep going on, but I think it wouldn't even do the man justice realistically. And it's very impressive because Henny always shows people that you can be professional on an iPad. So the fact that they're making the iPad Air 3, I'm specifically going to point more towards the 3 for audio and sound engineering, but I do see some uses for the mini. But specifically the Air, the fact that now it's 10.5 inches, it's a very good bargain now, especially because it has the A12. So it's the cheapest way to get the A12 chip. Obviously, we don't know how much RAM is going to be inside of it. I think even with 3, it'd be fine. Knowing Apple, they'll probably give it 2. But if they give it 3, then it's going to be very impressive, in my opinion. But we just have to wait and see because, obviously, wait, actually, no. You could probably just go on the Apple website and probably check, but I didn't do that. But it's really interesting, though. And then, obviously, college students. I honestly will keep using this reference point for me. I always, when I go to my high school, I always see these high schoolers walking around with MacBook Pros. I'm going to say this like I tell everybody else, you don't need that. You are doing nothing important that it's utilizing that thing's power. You are not doing anything productive enough to use its power to its fullest. There is a reason it's called a pro product for professionals. A high school student is not a professional. Obviously, yes, if they're, say they do YouTubing and stuff like that on the side, then yes, that would make sense. But if you're just using it for taking notes, you wasted your money, realistically. And I tell this for college students as well because you don't need a $1,000 laptop to take notes. You don't. Go buy yourself a Chromebook or something like that. And even now, I have a $1,000 laptop, but my machine is meant for CAD designing, and obviously I can also use it for video editing and a main workstation. But my iPad is also very powerful, but I can also use it for notes and doing homework on the go. And it's just more, that mobility is very helpful to me. And especially because it's making not only my podcasting gig a little bit easier, but at the same time, it makes traveling and carrying equipment a lot easier because I don't have to pack heavy anymore. I can pack light. And for college students, the fact that you can have a $500 tablet that basically is able to do everything you need to do for taking notes and everything, and it's very easy because now that it has Apple Pencil support, you can write on it. So realistically, it is a good bargain. And the mini is good for notes if you're just going to write notes. If you're already used to writing in notes and everything, and if you want something to take with you to go to a lab and jot down what's going down in the lab, it's a good option as well. And like I said, for medical students, it's really easy for them to use it to take notes as well. I don't know about the Air, but I'd still, in my opinion, if you just want a notepad, the mini is really great for it. For $400, it's obviously a better deal than realistically, the Air and the mini are now better deals than the 2018 iPad that's $280 because it obviously has a better, more updated CPU that's clearly better by a lot. It's not a little difference, it's a good amount. So it's interesting because now we're at a point where, how does it affect the Apple lineup? How does this affect Apple's iPad lineup specifically? Because now they have an option for every price range. They have their very expensive ones, they have their mid-ranges, and now they have their budget options. Obviously, mid-range, I would argue that the 10.5-inch iPad Pro is the mid-range because it's still a very capable tablet as well. Very good speakers, 4 speakers and everything. Very good accessories. So it's still a mid-range product. I would say it's a mid-range because obviously we already have the updated iPad Pros, which are monsters in their own, but they're very expensive. And now we have these quote-unquote budget ones. How does this affect their lineup? Because when you look at it, before they even announced this, Apple really didn't have a budget iPad. They didn't have an affordable tablet for the market. And a lot of people were clamoring that they wanted a Mini 5 and they wanted an Air 3. But Apple had been very hesitant for many years to not make one. And the fact that they decided to come around, and actually they revealed them a week before the press conference. The press conference is next week on Monday. The 25th of March is the Apple press conference. And I honestly believe now, the fact that they showed off the tablets the week earlier, this really means that they're just going to focus heavily on their streaming service that they're working on. But I'll talk about that next week when we get there. But you get the point. Now Apple has an iPad in every price range. They have the budgets, they have the mid-ranges, and now they have the expensives. All of them very capable in their own rights. So I know what you guys are probably thinking. You're probably thinking, wait, doesn't that cause an issue though? Because, well, realistically, you could find a 10.5-inch iPad Pro for $500. Obviously, I got mine for free, but that's a different story. But I remember somebody said that they felt bad for people that bought the 10.5-inch Pro recently, and I'm like, I would make the argument I wouldn't feel bad because even though, yes, I get that the CPU is pretty old, it's from 2017, but it's still a very capable machine. It can still run very intensive tasks and whatever you need it to do realistically. But obviously, I get why some people would say that they should have just saved and bought the Air 3, really. But I would make the argument if you bought a 10.5 recently, you shouldn't feel bad. It's still, in my opinion, I think it's still going to be good until 2021 at least, 2020 or 2022, my bad, not 2020. It's still going to be good for a good time. And now that these are out, obviously, yes, they're going to last longer, clearly, because the A12 is a very recent chip, and obviously, but it's also a sad thing because Apple moves at such a fast rate. These chips get outdated pretty quickly, and it's kind of scary if you think about it because we're already going to get the A13 this year, and that thing's going to be a monster. The A12 is already ahead of most of the competition. It was definitely ahead of the Snapdragon 845 and the Android phones by a large margin. I don't know how much far ahead it is compared to the 855, but we'll find out. But it's interesting because now we have affordable options and they support Apple Pencils. So now Apple is actually allowing their more affordable options to support the original Apple Pencil. Even though, yes, it is the original and not the new one, and I get why the new one is better, especially because it charges wirelessly. You don't have to stick it into the lightning port and charge it. And obviously, yes, it doesn't... It obviously looks better and it's easier to hold the second gen Apple Pencil. And I get all the things that go for it, but at the same time, just like, it's still obviously, yes, I realize that Apple is not going to allow you to, well, realistically, they can't support the new Apple Pencils on the older ones because you can't charge them, and at the same time, you can't. That's kind of dumb, though, to say that that the first Apple Pencil doesn't work on the new tablets, on the new Pros, especially because you can charge it on a stand and not have to charge it using the tablet, which a lot of people I've seen charge it on a little stand made by TechMat. So I don't know why they didn't, but I know why they did it, because they want you to buy the new one, clearly. And it was $30 more. But you get my point. We now have more affordable iPads in the market and very powerful ones for their price range. Obviously, yes, Android tablets will never be better than the iPads. They never will. I'm just being real with you guys. Apple just dominates the tablet market. They have it such a firm lockdown on it. There's absolutely no way Android's going to make a tablet better than them. Obviously, some people say, well, what about the Surface Pro and stuff like that? Well, remember, the Surface Pro is a laptop replacement because it runs Windows. And then some people are going to say, what about the Samsung tabs? They're not going to be as good. They're never as good as iPads. They look nice. I'm not going to lie. They do look beautiful, but they'll never be better than the iPads. They won't, realistically. They lag, and they're just not as powerful as the iPads. Even though, yes, they can clearly run a desktop experience with Samsung Desk, but it's just not as good as the iPad. My opinion is the Apple ecosystem as a whole is a well-supported ecosystem that has a lot of benefits to it. It already gives you GarageBand, which is a professional product or professional resource, a tool that is very handy, and they give it to you for free. They also have iMovies and stuff like that. LumaFusion is very popular now, and on iPads, because LumaFusion is able to optimize its power, or they're able to optimize the iPad's power to work with it. And obviously it's amazing on the Pro because people have used it. Henny uses it to record his videos. Well, not record, but edit his videos and things like that. Obviously he makes his music on there. And then obviously, yes, Adobe Rush is also a good option. Obviously you have to pay for the Adobe Cloud. If you already have it, then great. But if you don't, poop. In my opinion, it's interesting. I wasn't expecting it. I was caught off guard from it. And that's really all I got for you guys. I can't really say much more about this. In my opinion, I'm just very impressed. I like to see where Apple goes with this and what their mindset was behind it. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get a 2019 iPad, aka a refresh of just the base model, especially because I just don't see the point for it anymore, really. I think the base iPad should just be gone already because it doesn't really sell. It's just that middle child that nobody cares about, really. And I think they might actually get rid of that one I think they actually might do that. I think instead of dumping the Mini in the air, they decided to probably just get rid of the base iPads. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. Especially because now that the Minis and the Airs run A12s and they're very affordable and they were already popular compared to many of the iPads, besides the Pros, clearly. It's going to be interesting how this plays out. And in my opinion, I'm interested to see how audio engineers / sound engineers, or realistically up-and-comers, view this new technology they might actually use it to add to their collection. I think the iPad Air, specifically for people that want to become music producers or audio / sound engineers, realistically, I think it's a good option for them. It's a $400, $500 tablet with Apple Pencil. You can just buy the keyboards from somebody for really cheap. And I think overall it's a good bargain. And obviously you can get the adapters for cheap too, find them on eBay. And in my opinion, it's a good deal. That's my opinion. Realistically, I think they're good deals, and I think they're important. I think overall they're important to Apple's lineup. I think they're important to how this impacts college students, med students, future audio / sound engineers, I think it's important to them because now it presents them a new tool to use to do their job more efficiently. Obviously, college students, iPad Air 3 is a great option for a machine, or let's call it a laptop replacement if you want to call it that, for classes, so you can take your notes on it and write on it. So you can still maintain that feel of writing on paper. Obviously, you need to get a screen protector made by Paper or something. I forgot what they're called, but they make screen protectors that make it feel like paper. So you keep the same feel of as if you were writing on paper. And then for obviously med students, the fact that the Mini 5 is a great notepad based on what I'm seeing, it'll be very interesting. And then heck, even for people that just like writing down notes, just taking along with them. Like I know Sergio, the youth pastor for my church, I know he uses an iPad Mini I think he uses an Air or something like that. I forgot what it was, but he uses it to write the charts or like get the notes and everything that he needs for the songs they're going to play. So I think overall it's a very handy tool, and I think Apple did a great job at the fact that they compromised where they needed to compromise, but they made the specs very important and they supported it with the right tools. Obviously, with both of them supporting the first Apple Pencil is really important, and the fact that now they're also, the Air 3 is compatible with all the accessories of the 10.5-inch iPad Pro. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I do believe that Apple is going to end up phasing out the 10.5-inch Pro from sales, but still keep supporting them. But I like the direction they're going in with their tablet line. It's the same thing I say with smartwatches. Apple has a firm grip because the Apple Watch Series 4 is just an amazing watch. Overall, it's one of the best smartwatches you can get. I don't think you can argue with me on that one, or not even me, but probably the tech community or people that are very invested in understanding technology or tech savvy. I think even people that have biases towards Apple can make the argument, or at least come to an agreement that yes, it is a superior product compared to many. And obviously iPads, just no matter what, the iPads will probably reign supreme as the best tablets, and I think Apple will keep doing that. Obviously in smartphones, Apple has a lot of competition going for them, and we'll see how they end up doing this year, especially because, new iPhones are coming out this year. Samsung S10 is in my opinion, it's the bar for this year's smartphone, so we're going to see what everybody does this year. I'm personally excited, and I hope you guys are too. But pretty much with that, I think that's all I got for you guys. I really can't say much more about this topic, and, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. So for next week's episode, I'm going to see, because I have something in mind, but I'll probably post it in the Instagram page to let you guys know what I'm thinking about. But until then, guys, I hope you guys take care of yourselves. I love you guys to death. Have yourselves a good week. Bye, guys.